Nagy, he was there in Mobile. Baylor had a nice contingent and flavor there as well, but not just Baylor, many others. Jim, as always, thank you so much. And also, what you do to run that event is incredible. Baylor had a contingent, obviously Jalen Petry, Abram Smith, among some others. And I've seen some chatter about what Petry and Abram have done. Your thoughts about those two, at least off the top, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, appreciate you having me back on. Yeah, we had a nice Baylor crew down here this year. Abram, I think, is one of the coolest stories in this year's draft with the position switch kind of back and forth from running back to linebacker and finally settling in and having that breakout year this year. Sometimes it's hard to fully evaluate the running backs during the week just because we don't really tackle to the ground during practice. So to see what Abram did during the game, bouncing off and running through a lot of contact, which he did there at Baylor, looked like the same guy, and it was the best against the best competition in this year's draft class. So that was good. He did well in the blitz pickup stuff, which is always key for the week. These guys showing off what they can do in the pass game. He caught it well, and then Jalen Petry. I've made no secret about it. He's one of my favorite guys in the draft. If I were a GM, I'd want that guy on my football team. I just love the energy he plays with. He's kind of a live wire. Got in the game the other day and just balled out. Was all over the place, very active like he always is. Putting his face on people. So, both those guys showed really well during the week.
For Jalen, is it, a lot of times because you play a couple of different weird positions and different defenses in college, that's kind of a detriment to you. But with the way that defenses are shifting, is he maybe, because of that, almost a perfect guy to have on any defense because he can do a lot of things?
Yeah, a smart coordinator is going to find a home for him. He's an instinctive player. I think he is a little bit of a tweener, but the NFL has done a much better job over probably the last 4, 5, 6 years of using those guys. Now, tweener used to kind of carry a negative connotation. It doesn't anymore. You just got to find a place for them. So I think you got to look at guys like Budda Baker and guys in that vein. Really give you kind of a blueprint on how to use Jalen. So. Again, he's an active guy. He's got really good eyes. He's instinctive. He's urgent. He's just a really good football player. So, any defense should be able to find a home for him.
Jim, there were a couple other Baylor Bears there before we move on to some other schools. J.T. Woods, who I know was a late addition to the game, obviously a rangy, long safety. And then Terrell Bernard, which is unfortunate. I know he got banged up during the week or was hurt and couldn't participate in the game. How is that kind of viewed when guys, like there's an injury during the week like that? Is that any sort of a knock on Terrell Bernard? How is that sort of viewed? And your thoughts as well on J.T. Woods? Obviously, guys brought him in to round out those rosters.
Starting with Terrell, that was a pre-existing injury. So he was working on his 40 starts with his trainers the week leading up to Senior Bowl, which is beyond me. Why you would be doing that when you're getting ready to go play football in 3 or 4 days? But so he tweaked a hamstring, leading into our week, and then we had a stretch and run period on Monday just to get the guys loose a little bit, and he felt it tighten up, so he couldn't finish through the week, which is unfortunate because our week was really set up for this guy to shine. He's what the league's looking for in terms of athletic space linebackers. You guys have all watched him. Mm-hmm. I think he would have excelled during practice all week, covering backs and tight ends, and really helped himself. So that was a bummer that he was working on 40 starts right before coming to Mobile. And JT, he's a little bit of a late ad, but I told all those guys, we brought guys up in midweek. We've had some midweek call-ups over the years that have gone in the third round. So you nailed him. He's long, he's rangy, he can really, really run. He came out with our Zebra Technology stuff. Zebra Technology is the official data partner of the National Football League. And we have those guys, their pads are chipped all week, and we're tracking all that stuff. And one of the fastest players here in Mobile, which is no surprise because he was hitting some really good GPS numbers there at Baylor as well. So, and then he had a knack this year. He got around the ball. Whatever he finished with, 4 or 5 picks. He had one in the game down here. So, did nothing but help himself.
Yeah, that's not good about the injury before the week of the Senior Bowl. Is that something, Jim, and I don't know how much you can say, I know you're disappointed, is that something that might have been agent-driven?
No, because it was a legit injury. It was he did it during training. Again, okay. Some players and some agent groups I would be skeptical of, but not Terrell Bernard, man. That is not how that kid's wired. I think you guys know that.
Yeah.
He is a football player. He wanted to be out there. Again, I really question the decision to be working on 40 starts a few days before probably the most important stage of the process for these guys. He's got all these guys leave Mobile. They got 5 weeks to work on their 40-yard dash start. So the fact that they were doing that, 3 or 4 days before coming down here was a head scratcher to me.
Yeah, and JT Woods, Jalen Petry, but you mentioned these guys from Baylor, and they are football players. Some of them, like you mentioned, some of them are tweeners or this and that, but it does seem as if they have produced just football players. And I know that it's height and weight and times and all that. How much does that still go into consideration? They just make plays.
I mean, yeah, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And then when you have guys that test the way that these guys are going to test, well, now you're really cooking, right? So no, they're good players. They're instinctive. They're on the ball, and I think it just speaks to the culture of Baylor right now. And guys like Petry and Bernard and Abram were guys that, talking to the staff, really, help build and solidify that culture. I mean, you turn on Baylor, especially on defense, compared to what they were a few years ago. It's a different program, right? And that's why you were in the Sugar Bowl. So no, those guys just play hard. When I use the word urgent to describe Jalen Petry, I mean, that's one of the best words you can describe if you're in a draft room. If you're describing a defensive player as being urgent and a guy that wants to get to the football, again, that's one of the best things you can say about him.
Who among the group maybe changed the narrative about themselves the most, or jumped up a round or two based on the practices?
Of all the players?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Perrion Winfrey from Oklahoma really helped himself. You talk about a guy that was probably playing a little bit out of position there at Oklahoma. He played nose tackle. And Perrion's a big, long, angular body guy. Really not ideal for playing head up on a center. And they played him at 3 technique down here, and he had an incredible week. He was he was just looked unblockable during the game. He had 2 sacks, 3 TFLs. He probably came in as a 3rd round pick, maybe a 4th round pick. Now I think he's in the conversation to be a 1st round pick. So anytime you get a guy with 35-inch plus arms, big and long, that also has explosion, those guys are really hard to find. They don't grow on trees, as we used to say when I was in New England. So if they don't grow on trees, you better go get them. Perrion Winfrey certainly helped himself a ton.
You had a trio of Iowa State Cyclones there with Mike Rose and Charlie Kohler and also Andrew Mevis. Did you see anything in particular from the trio of Cyclones you had down there?
Yeah, well, Mike Rose couldn't show up. He had a neck condition that was diagnosed coming out of the bowl game. It's kind of misdiagnosed during the season there at Iowa State, so that was really unfortunate. He's getting that worked on right now. I don't know how much Mike's going to be able to do during the pre-draft process or not. Certainly, the physicality of our practices, he couldn't do that. But no, Charlie Kohler had a really good week. Andrew Mavis had a good week. Andrew Mavis was the special teams player of the week down here. And Charlie Kohler is just, I think he's a better athlete than a lot of people give him credit for. He's a big 6'6" guy that, can obviously play on the end of the line of scrimmage and do a lot of things as a blocker. But him at the top of a route, he can drop his weight, he can get open and separate. So, and that showed up all week during the one-on-one.
I saw some, and I don't have the name in front of me, Jim, and I'm sorry, but the young man from Wyoming, did he jump up the charts last week?
Yeah, Chad Moom is a linebacker out of Wyoming. We had his former teammate Logan Wilson in the game a couple years ago, and now all Logan Wilson's doing is, starting for a Super Bowl team in the Bengals, and had 5 interceptions this year from his linebacker spot. So, Logan went in the 3rd round a couple years ago to Cincy. I think Chad might even go higher. Super instinctive guy, athletic in space. Again, I talked about Terrell being a guy the league's looking for. Chad kind of fits that description as well. He can play on all 3 downs. Again, just great eyes. Just gets to the football, will run and hit. He and Terrell Bernard are pretty similar players, and we had them graded similarly. I think both of those guys will end up going in round 2.
There's a lot been made about this quarterback class, from the national media, but you got to see them kind of up close and personal. What did you think of the guys? And you had pretty much all of the ones that anybody wants to talk about at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, we had 6 of the top 7. The only guy we didn't get was Matty Corral from Ole Miss, who the Baylor fans saw in the Sugar Bowl for a brief time there before he got hurt. And Matt was a junior, so he wasn't eligible for us. But yeah, the group was, it was a great week because we've had, we've had guys like Josh Allen and Russell Wilson and Justin Herbert, it'd be top 10 picks. I don't know if any of these guys are slam dunk top 10 guys. But the great thing is there's no order right now. I think this week in Mobile, this past week really helped some teams, start to figure out what that stack is going to look like by the time we get to April. And they all had their moments. I was happy that most of them really showed out well in the game. Cincinnati's Desmond Ridder threw a couple touchdowns. Kenny Pickett only played one quarter, but I think he was 6 of 6 for 89 yards or something like that. Threw a touchdown. Malik Willis did a lot with his legs and looked really good. So, the game is important for the quarterbacks. It really is, and they all showed well. So we'll just see. I think that you got Ridder, Kenny Pickett, and Malik Willis are probably the top 3 right now, with like Sam Howell and Carson Strong from Nevada kind of right behind those guys. So it'll be interesting how many of these guys end up in the first round. I would think it's probably going to be 3 or 4 of them.
What did you think of the pair of SMU Mustangs, Grant Calcaterra and Danny Gray?
Yeah, and we should have had Reggie Roberson down here. And again, he's the guy that popped his pec doing bench presses like 3 days before Mobile, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. But go
Jim,
figure.
I can only imagine the phone calls you get like in the lead up to this, man. You're just probably scared every time your phone rings.
Yeah, it's brutal, man. I'm telling you, it's like if my phone rings from an agent within 2 or 3 weeks of the game, it's never a good phone call.
Yeah,
they're not asking you where the hotel is. No.
Yeah, it's never anything like that. But no, Danny Gray, unfortunately, he came in, he'd hurt his heel, doing some stuff coming down here. And then he hurt it the first day, which was really unfortunate because I think Danny's got as much upside as any receiver in this draft. I told him that before he left. He really only got about a half a practice in here before he jumped up and landed on his heel again and just pain shot through his leg. So we had to get him off the field. But really explosive, has a ton of playmaking upside. Again, his best football is way in front of him, Danny Gray. So, talent-wise, I think he's a day 2 player. It really a good full week down here would have helped him. I'm bummed that he couldn't make it through. And Grant, it's a really deep tight end class. So the interesting thing in terms of where those guys will end up going is like where that run starts. When do they start coming off the board? Because once they start going, then everyone's going to start picking them off. So it'll when will that happen? Is that going to happen in the second round? Is that going to happen in the third round? Not sure. But Grant's going to be part of that group. First of all, he was a great kid to have down here. Really, really good guy to talk to and hang out with. Really mature. He's going to hit the ground running as a pro, as a person. But just a fluid, big pass catcher. He can get open. He can get down the seam. Really adjust well to the football. So I could see him having a role next year for some team in the pass game, especially because he really does a nice job getting open and finishing on the football.
By the way, our guest has been a part of 6 Super Bowls on the staff, won 4 as a scout, along with the Packers, Patriots, and also with the Seahawks as a part of his career as well, and you can hear his passion. When you got the opportunity to start running this game, and you had scouted, I'm sure, this week many times, what did it mean to you? Because you can just feel it dripping off your body of how much this is something you love to do.
Yeah, it was a family decision. So we were here in Mobile, Alabama. It's my wife's hometown. We've been here, we're here 15 years now. So that was like 11 years we've been here. My son was getting to be, high school age, playing sports. And when you're scouting, you're on the road 200 plus nights a year. So you're just not around. And I wanted to be around for all my children's stuff. I've got a daughter who's now a 7th grader. So it was really a family thing, but I've always believed in the Senior Bowl. Everyone makes a lot about the combine. I just know teams I've worked for. When we've screwed up draft picks, it's because we put way too much of stock of what goes on in shorts and t-shirts. So I'm a big believer in what happens here this week, so it's easy for me to push it. It's easy to sell something that you believe in, and I just know the teams I work for. You get guys that come down here and compete, aren't afraid of it, and have a really nice week, interview well. I mean, this is the longest exposure any of these teams will have to any of these players. It really, in the big scheme of things, it's a short window for these teams to try to get to know these players and the $1 million investments they're making. So for a 7-day stretch to be with these guys on and off the field, I just always felt better when we were drafting Senior Bowl players because I felt like we knew them better. So yeah, it's really easy for me to be passionate about it because I believe in it.
I wanted to ask you before we let you go about Jermaine Johnson and the week that he had, and kind of showing everybody because his school doesn't get watched as much as they used to, and he was the reason to watch them this year.
Yeah, Jermaine he had a really good week. So he only practiced 2 days. He had an ankle injury late in Wednesday's practice and kind of shut it down from there. But he had a really good couple days. He was a guy that needed to have a good senior year. He was kind of stuck behind some really good players at Georgia, was a career backup at Georgia. And look at what they did this year. Their front seven was a historically good front seven. So he went to Florida State to find a new home. He was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. And just what he showed here is what he showed at Florida State. I mean, he has speed off the edge, but he really has a lot of power. He can convert that speed to power. He plays his tail off. So he's a high motor rusher. He's going to get a lot of cleanup sacks and things of that nature. So yeah, he had a really nice couple days. I would have loved to have seen Jermaine in the game. We had 3 defensive players on the national team have 2 sacks. And I think Jermaine would have been on the other team. But I think he could have had a good game as well. But he probably came into the week as a late 1 to mid 2 somewhere for most of the teams. And now after the week he had down here, I would doubt he gets out of the first round now.
Jim, final thing for you. You talked about the 4 Baylor guys that were in the Senior Bowl. All 4 of those guys have received combine invites. I know for Terrell, he's got to get healthy, et cetera. But you already gave us a pretty good scouting report of the 4. But what do you think that batch of Baylor Bears need to focus and work on here as they take that next step towards the combine and this journey continues? Just work on those drills, and to me, it's for the football stuff. Like if you've been told you have some tightness, well, then work on your flexibility and move around. Look looser when you go to Indy and you go to your pro day. But again, tape is 90% of it. I really feel like the combine is a little overblown. It's great for TV and the NFL Network and all that. But when you're coming from a team's perspective, the combine's important for 2 things: the medical evaluations and the interviews. There's so much data technology out there now where we know how fast these guys play on a football field that I really think in a few years here, the 40 stuff will be obsolete. I don't even know if we'll be running them anymore. Just because the field speed stuff is now readily available. It's a lot more important how a guy carries his pads on a football field than how he runs a 40 in shorts. So to me, it's just go up there, interview well, and apply whatever you've done in your training on the field. But again, I think 90% of it's what they do on a football field, not what they do in shorts.
One more note. Xavier Newman Johnson, the offensive lineman, he was at the Shrine Bowl, and he had a good week. He's not going to the combine. Do you feel like that's something will they add somebody late in the process as well? Is that the possibility, or is he just going to have to just kick on pro day?
Yeah, it's gonna have to be pro day. They're not gonna have any late ads. I actually talked to the director of the combine earlier today, and they're done. What they released today is their list, and so there's no chance of being late ads. But that's fine for a guy like Xavier. He'll have his pro day. I'm sure he had a good week out at the Shrine game, connecting the teams. There was a lot of teams out there for that event, so he'll be fine. He'll be fine. There's 325 guys invited to the combine. I think I saw, almost. 75 of those guys, 50 of those guys won't get drafted. And there's going to be a ton of guys that don't get combine invites that will get drafted. I mean, I think we had 8 guys in our game. That didn't get combine invites who, just talking to my guys around the league and my friends around the league that helping put our roster together. I feel like all 8 of those guys are slam dunk draft picks. So, they force a lot of juniors that come out that probably aren't draftable, take up a lot of spots at the combine just because the NFL needs to learn those guys better. So if you're a junior and you come out, you're getting a combine invite, whether you're a draftable player or not. That's just how it works. So those guys take up a lot of spots for those seniors.
Jim, thank you. Always love the insight, the passion, and information, background, and stories as well. Appreciate your time. Great job. Another great Reese's Senior Bowl. Jim Nagy, the executive director, with us on Cyclone 365 Radio and 365 Sports. I mentioned Georgia had the most players invited to the Combine, 14, Alabama, Oklahoma 11. Among the Big 12, Oklahoma 11, Baylor 7, Iowa State 6, Oklahoma State and Texas Tech with 3. Texas has 2, Kansas State, TCU, and West Virginia 1, and Kansas did not get somebody invited to the NFL Combine.
That number for Texas is one that they desperately need to get up because their recruiting rankings are not translating to NFL players.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a great number considering the way they've recruited for, many years in a row. I mean, especially when you compare it to Oklahoma, they've got 11. Compare Baylor's recruiting classes to UT's and Baylor, and they know it's timing too. Like, a lot of those guys for Baylor came back for a 5th year. Yeah. And so that certainly made that a bigger class than it was originally intended to be. And I saw some OU fans who are already counting down the days of the SEC and bragging about the number that they have and what the Big 12's number is going to be when they leave. And I don't know, it's going to go down, no doubt. You lose Oklahoma and Texas. With Texas, they'd be replaced by Cincinnati's numbers rather easily. So that wouldn't, in this particular year, that wouldn't be that big of a deal. But there'd still be a gap because of the amount that OU has. But OU's not going to put 11 guys out every year either. That's also a timing thing. They had some guys come back, so that's a big number. 11 guys, that's a huge number to have in this draft. It kind of makes this past season, I would think, even that much more disappointing, quite frankly, that you had 11 guys going to the Combine and you didn't make it to the Big 12 title game. But we know there was a lot of extracurricular stuff as well going on there in Norman, Oklahoma. So, yeah, I love the insight. He obviously is very high on the 4 Baylor guys that he got to see. The Terrell Bernard thing's very questionable and strange. The injury running, practicing 40s before going out there. That, in hindsight, was probably not a very good decision. So hopefully Terrell...
And you wonder who pushed that, whether it was him pushing himself or a trainer.
Yeah, and maybe he's just doing it. Maybe he didn't think anything of it and didn't realize that it wasn't a very smart move. I don't know. But obviously it was not a smart move in hindsight. We can say that rather easily. But yeah, good to hear positive reports on those guys. And it's a long journey still to go. With the Combine, like he said, it's maybe not as much of a big deal as it was, but, still got a couple months to improve your stock.
We have seen Kansas go down this week. We've seen Duke go down this